Here's how you calculate the maximum that you can offer on a property. And also, I might just tell you how to make sure that offer is successful as well. So I always say to start with the end in mind. Now, what do I mean? Now, start with the final value that you think the property will be worth. And how do we go about finding that final value? Well, we look for sold comparable properties in the area. Don't just go and look on Rightmove and see the things for sale and go, oh, this property is going to be worth 350 grand because that's what they're selling for in the area. No, look at what they've sold for. See, when a valuer goes, and that's a rich chartered surveyor, somebody who's actually qualified and follows the Red Book principles of valuation, they will look at sold comparables, ideally within a quarter of a mile that are sold within the last 6 months. However, that can stretch up to the last 12 months and maybe half a mile. And what you're looking for are equivalent types of properties. So for example, if it's a 3-bedroom terrace, then try and compare it with a 3-bedroom terrace. And you might then go and look at the different floor sizes as well. So for example, if you've got a 100 square meter property that's sold and yours is 110, you might work out the rough square meter value and then add on a little bit for yours. Now, that's how we're going to get the final values. This is a really important figure, so you've got to get this right. Final value of the property, and that means we can work backwards. So let's say in this example, the final value of my property is going to be £300,000, and that's once I've done up all of the work to my property. So I've got a £300,000 final value, or you might sometimes hear it referred to as a GDV. That just stands for gross development value. It's the same thing. It just sounds really cool. So 300,000 final value. Let's go for final value. I like it. It's more simple. I'm a simple guy. I like the simpler things in life. And so next thing I'm going to do is start taking away all of the expenses. Now, the one that people forget to take away, I'll tell you in a moment. Now, first thing I'm going to take away is the refurbishment cost. So let's say that I've calculated my refurbishment costs on this property to be £30,000. So that's the extent of the work that needs to be carried out. By the way, I'm making an assumption here that we've added a contingency into that budget. If you haven't, then add 10 to 15% depending on your level of experience. If you're new to the game, at least 15% contingency. Now, what I want to say here is we've just spoke about two of the most critical numbers that you're gonna have to figure out. Number one is the final value of the property, and number two is the refurb. If you can't get these numbers right, then you're heading for disaster. So getting good at valuing property based on their bricks and mortar value, based on sold comparables, can't emphasize that bit enough, is one of the key skills that you need to develop. And then getting good at projecting and estimating your refurb costs is the next key skill that you need to develop. This is gonna be the difference between doing great deals and doing a load of work, and if you're lucky, getting your money back. So refurbishment costs, how would we project that? I want you to create what we call a schedule of works, and a schedule of works will break down and itemize all of the work that needs to be delivered to the building. Now, a schedule of works will cover in depth how many plasterboards do you need? How many days do you need the painter there? How many liters of paint do you need? Now, that means with a fair degree of accuracy, you can have your refurb calculated, which also is going to help you if you actually go through with the property to deliver that refurb. Again, make sure that you add a provision for contingency. 10 to 15%, I would say, is about right. So we've got our final value because we're working backwards. We've got our refurb cost that we're fairly confident in. And then the next thing that we're going to take away are our stamp duty, legal fees, or at least we're going to get thereabouts, because of course it might alter slightly depending on what the actual cost you end up buying for is. Now, let's say in this example, my stamp duty and legals are going to be around £15,000. So I've got to take that away from the original 300,000. So 300,000 minus 30,000 for refurb, minus 15,000 for stamp duty and legals. That now brings me down to £255,000. But we're not there yet. Here's the thing that most people forget to take off. Can you guess what it is? It's the profit, because you're not doing this for the fun of it, are you? So you need to make sure that you deduct your profit. Now, let's say, for example, the minimum profit that you're willing to take away on this deal is £40,000. Then we're going to have to take that away as well. So I'm going to minus £40,000, and that's going to leave me with the amount of money that I can bid up to on this particular property. So we've got 30,000, 15,000 and 40,000. So that's a total of 80,000, 85,000 pound off of our original 315, which means the maximum that I can go up to on this property to make my minimum profit is £215,000. So that's where I'm going to be offering. Now, by the way, that means that the property might be listed for more than that. This exercise is to work out, well, what's the most you can pay? So if you're bidding at auction, you need to know what your cap is. But also, if you're looking online, this property might be on for 250 at this moment in time. It doesn't mean you shouldn't analyze it. A big mistake that people make is they go and find a property for 250, they do their numbers and they go, well, that doesn't work. It's going to be 250, I'm going to spend this, and then it's only going to be worth 300K. Well, hold on a minute. Who said you're going to pay 250? So part of the game is being really good at your numbers. The next part of the game is negotiating the purchase price. And to negotiate the purchase price, I would recommend that once you've done these numbers and you've got an indication. So let's say in this scenario that the property is on for 250,000. Once you know that the most you can pay is 215, at that point, I recommend putting a phone call into the agent and testing for price flexibility. It's going to save you a hell of a lot of time. So phone up the agent and I would ask the question, say, look, I'm an investor. I'm not local. I'm going to have to travel several hours to get to view this property. Before I book that viewing, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. I just want to know, based on the numbers that I've done, the most that I'm going to be able to offer on this property is about 230,000. I wouldn't necessarily go straight down to 215, might be too much of a jump. So most I'll be able to pay is about 230,000. Is it still worth me coming to view? Because they might say, nope, we've already had an offer higher than that, in which case, don't waste your time. Or they might turn around and say, yes, we definitely think it's worth coming to view. Or sometimes they might turn around and say, I don't know. In which case you might just have to take your chances. But that's going to save you so much time going to view properties where there is no room for negotiation. So in this scenario, we've got a property now, we've worked the figures all the way backwards. And by the way, in this stamp duty and fees, make sure that you include your selling costs as well. If the goal here is to flip, you're going to have to pay legals twice because you're going to be paying legals to sell again. And you're going to have to pay some agency fees if you're doing that via estate agent. So in this scenario, theoretical scenario, we've worked our figures back from the final value. We've worked out the maximum that we would be able to pay. And we've worked out how we can test for price flexibility. So the only thing left for me to say is, you're welcome.